what do we mean when we talk about ultra-processed foods? It's really foods that they have been through packaging, their additives to enhance their flavor, to enhance their color. So it's really all the food that tastes so good that it makes it hard for you to resist. And it's food that is packaged. It's not food like the way we find it in nature. So let's give you a few examples. Packaged chips, sodas, muffins, turkey, or slices of ham, or ultra-processed drinks. Anything that when you look at the package, you see a bunch of ingredients, and some of these names you really don't know what they're talking about. They're maybe sugar-free or they may be fat-free, but then instead of sugar, they have other additives. They can have sweeteners to still make it taste sweet. So in recent years, there has been a huge explosion of production of ultra-processed foods, and not only production, but also consumption of all those foods by teenagers. And there has been different studies that try to see what's the effect of having all this ultra-processed food in teenagers. So one of these big studies was recently published in February 2025 in Pediatric Obesity Journal. The actual title of the manuscript is Ultra-Processed Food Consumption and Obesity Among Children and Adolescents in China. So this was a huge study that involved more than 3,000 kids. They were between the ages of 6 to 18 years of age. And what the researchers did is they asked all these more than 3,000 kids to write down what food they're eating based on their memory. And then they had specific diary logs. And then they were able to give a score of how much ultra-processed food every child consumed. And then they looked at their height, their weight, and they calculate their body mass index. If you don't know what body mass index is, you can go and listen to episode 1, where I explain more into details on how to find out a specific child's body mass index. But in general, a body mass index is a tool that scientists use to assess the degree of unhealthy weight when they're conducting studies about extra weight. And this study, I loved it because not only did they use the body mass index, but they also did weight circumference measurements. So basically, they looked at how big was the belly fat, like extra fat around the belly, because we know from research studies that the fat that is around the belly is not only cosmetically not good for many people, but also has a lot of bad health implications. So we know that people that have more belly fat, for example, are at higher risk to get insulin resistance and diabetes. They're at higher risk to get higher blood pressure. They're at higher risk to get liver inflammation. So overall, the fat in the belly is more dangerous than fat in other parts of the body. Researchers in this particular study, they also looked at the kids' waist circumference, which is an indirect measurement to calculate how much fat is around the kid's belly. And what they found was that the higher the percentage of points, if we can call it like that, the higher the score on the consumption of this unprocessed food, the higher the kids' BMI. So they were almost twice more likely to have an unhealthy body mass index when they were eating a lot of processed foods compared to if they eat natural foods. And this has to do not only with the calories, but also about the quality of the food. Because when you are eating something that is ultra processed, then your body gets exposed to all these other chemicals, and all this ingredients that can affect the balance of your hormones. They can produce more insulin resistance. They can also potentially affect the gut health. So your food is not absorbed in the same way, whether it is processed or natural food. And also, it tends to lead to more overeating. So this was a wonderful study that basically showed that not only the calories of the food is what is important, but also the quality of the food. And whether you have, let's say, one portion of natural food, let's say chicken and broccoli, versus you have one portion of pizza and soda, then it's not the same thing, even though they are exactly the same calories. And another important message from this study was that the kids that had higher ultra-processed food, they also had higher belly fat. Their bellies were bigger, which means that they were higher risk for these metabolic complications. So again, not only the overall BMI was bigger, but in particular, the fat around the belly, which causes more inflammation and higher risk for metabolic derangements and hormonal imbalances, that was also higher. So my take-home message today is to examine your dietary intake and set aside the calories for a second, but look to categorize what do you think is the percentage of ultra-processed food. In other words, food that is packaged that you're consuming every day versus food that is natural, like vegetables, fruits, anything that is like nuts or avocado or healthy food that is not packaged. So I know it is very difficult to completely eliminate all the processed food. However, even if you can cut back a little bit, that would be a huge progress. And we're not talking about going from 100 to 0, but even if you go from 100 to 50, like cutting back by half the amount of ultra-processed food, that can have a lot of benefits to your overall health. And the first thing into making this change is first to realize where this ultra-processed food is coming from. Do you think that in your daily routine, for example, you always have a snack protein bar that is supposed to be healthy, but maybe it's not so healthy because it doesn't have only protein, but it has other ingredients that are processed? And can you substitute this protein bar with, let's say, a banana or let's say yogurt, like Greek yogurt, for example, and fruit? So making these small changes can have beneficial effects, not just for the overall body mass index, but also for your body inflammation, the central fat, your belly fat. So I hope this was helpful, and let me know what you find out by going through your dietary intake and examining your ultra-processed food. And as always, don't forget to go to lifestyleforteens.com and click on free resources for more free help. Thank you.